Coming into the home stretch here in May 2026, the two leading Democrats running for California governor personify the difference between neoliberal establishment and anti-establishment progressive. Xavier Becerra is a classic example of a politician who rose the ranks of the Democratic Party by appeasing the powers that be and never really standing for anything. Tom Steyer, meanwhile, seeks to use his good fortune to benefit others by giving Californians a real progressive governor for the first time in generations. In his early life, Tom Steyer took his education very seriously. He gained experience in the finance world and scored big the very first time he struck out on his own. From his own admission, due to some luck. Tom Steyer is a little bit like a Mitt Romney for the left, except Steyer is coming from a wing of the spectrum, whereas Romney came from the moderate side of conservatism. Either way, the comparison is sound because they both didn't just do well in the private sector, they absolutely crushed it in the private sector. So much so that they were able to create for themselves not only legacies of success, but legacies of success that include institutions that will outlive them. You might recall that Mitt Romney was actually a fairly productive governor for Massachusetts and an effective senator for Utah. My seventh Dieter decree, just because someone is the best or among the best at what they do doesn't mean they're good at anything else, much less everything else, does not dismiss the conventional knowledge that relatively self-made people have a tremendous set of acquired knowledge, accumulated experience, and seasoned skills. While certainly advantaged more so than, say, their peers of color, Mitt Romney and Tom Steyer are most assuredly men of exceptional talent and achievement, especially within the context of a capitalist economy. Let's address the first and most abused criticism of Tom Steyer. He's a billionaire. By way of my upbringing and by way of a handful of professional and social relationships, I have had the experience of interacting with all sorts of billionaires on many different occasions. Entrepreneurs, legendary investors, and even heirs. I've known them all. From those experiences, from researching Steyer's past and from getting to know Steyer's ethos through his campaign, particularly his appearances on independent media outlets such as Hassan Piker, I can say with confidence that Tom Steyer is a self-aware, benevolent billionaire who, unlike a lot of billionaires, has come to terms with the one undeniable truth in all of human existence. We're all going to die someday. As the saying goes, Father Time is undefeated. How does mortality help explain Tom Steyer's motives for running for governor for the state of California? He understands that when you die, your reputation becomes your legacy. And he wants to be remembered for being a maverick public servant, not just a maverick player in the game of capitalism. I don't know if the guy had great parents, survived some sort of hardship early in his life, or just has worked really hard with a therapist. But Tom Steyer seems like just about the most well-adjusted billionaire I've ever known. He knows he was lucky to be born the son of a prominent Jewish lawyer and a WASP mother in America's greatest city. He knows he was lucky that they were able to provide him with the best education money can buy, being able to attend such academic institutions as Exeter, Yale, and Stanford. He knows that when he took the first big risk of his career, he was lucky to hit a home run. There's a saying amongst those greediest of Americans: your toughest million is your first million. The converse of this cliche of capitalism is it's a lot easier to make money once you have money. Tom Steyer knows the difference between being rich and being wealthy because he knows his success was entirely dependent on his ability to raise $15 million in 1986 to start an investing firm. At the age of 28, by the way. So before he turned 30, Steyer didn't just have his first million in the bank, he had many millions to spread out in various investments over the course of the next 27 years. At the age of 55, Steyer moved on from investing and decided to try his hand at giving back to the society that gave him so much, starting myriad nonprofits, including a community bank that helped the low-income families have access to capital since mainstream banks wouldn't give it to them. More specific popular criticisms of Steyer include his investments in private prisons and fossil fuels. What people fail to mention when these examples come up is that Tom Steyer did something that politicians never do when faced with a mistake. He changed his mind. He divested. He admitted he was wrong, and part of the reason he's running is to right exactly these kinds of cancerous sectors. Xavier Becerra, on the other hand, has been a part of the Democratic Party establishment since I was 6 years old. He spent 24 years in Congress, served a term as California's Attorney General, and then had 4 very problematic years with the Biden administration as Secretary of Health and Human Services. As AG for California, Becerra caught a lot of heat for being resistant to enact law enforcement transparency measures. As HHS Secretary, many former members of the Biden administration and CDC have publicly blamed Becerra for several problems during COVID, including Becerra failing to prevent $11 billion in fraudulent unemployment claims from being distributed. Also, as HHS Secretary, Becerra rushed to place migrant children with families, leaving thousands of them vulnerable to exploitive labor practices. Then there's the latest scandal of embezzlement by his campaign staff, of which Becerra, of course, denies knowledge. No one says you don't have to cut some corners to get to the top, but having a chief of staff and campaign manager mess with your money in such a sloppy way does not bode well for the functionality of Becerra's team. So why is Becerra currently ahead of Steyer in the polls if he's such a flawed neoliberal establishment figure? Partly because a lot of people still can't get past Steyer being a billionaire, but also because of that dreaded term, identity politics. Just based on public persona, Xavier Becerra fails. He deflects when asked tough questions. He never invokes specific policy proposals or other action plans. And he talks about himself and his personal story more than anything. As a veteran member of the Democratic Party establishment, it is no surprise that Xavier Becerra is guilty of committing all 3 of America's deadly political sins. Becerra's hypocrisy becomes naked when he says repeatedly, over and over again, about he's a politician who likes to get things done. Yet he's been in office for 36 years and hasn't really gotten all that much done. Becerra's narcissism arrives when he starts talking about himself as an inspiration to other sons and daughters of immigrants, as if that has anything to do with him serving as a good governor. Becerra's ignorance reveals itself in basic interviews where any idiot can notice just by paying attention that he has no command of the data and no ideas for how to enact big structural change. Another variable to consider when contrasting these 2 candidates is the people they would bring into their administrations as governor. Steyer is a proven talent evaluator in both the private and nonprofit sectors. Becerra would just bring in more do-nothing Democrats like himself. By the way, just one example of a central policy position, Steyer is for single-payer health care while Becerra is not. How you can be a Democrat in 2026 and not support some kind of universal healthcare system at this point is beyond me. Steyer's team will be more talented, more competitive, and as anti-establishment as we can hope to expect. And that's really the entire pivot point of this race, or at least it should be. The establishment of the Democratic Party has been running California for 16 years, and the results of their leadership speak for themselves. Highest poverty rate, highest gas prices, record homelessness. Hollywood's not even creating jobs in California like they used to. The question every anti-MAGA Californian should be asking themselves when thinking about the governor's race is, do I want someone who's going to remodel California's Democratic Party, or do I want someone who's going to continue the legacy of neoliberal corporatism that produced California's current problems? In as simple terms as I can possibly muster, California, do you want a billionaire Bernie or a worse version of Gavin Newsom? Because basically, that's the choice you're facing. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, and never forget that you don't get change in America by asking nicely.